Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. I'm Jeff Allison, and thank you for watching.
This project is some floor pans for our 68 Mustang. We're going to be custom making them, and that's because our car has custom full-length frame rails, and we're doing custom suspension in the whole car. So I started out with a factory floor pan replacement type. Notch didn't fit in it, and when I got all done, I just didn't like the way it looked. And it was all because of these full-length frame rails. The floor pan itself actually fit the car pretty well. Just didn't kind of fit the design I was going for, or the look I was going for. So I decided I'm going to go back in and make them with some 16 gauge sheet metal here. Okay, so the material we're going to be using is this cold rolled 16 gauge sheet metal. This has got a primer lock on it. And it's really nice. It's once you start welding on it, you just need to take enough off that you can get some clean metal and you can weld right up to it. It doesn't burn, it doesn't peel. So once you're done, you can clean it up and it's good to go. While the whole rest of the panel is protected from any moisture or anything. My shop here is in New Mexico. We've got a really dry climate. Surface rust is not a big problem most of the year. We've had a little bit of humidity this year, which would cause some. But for those of you who aren't aware, the difference between cold rolled and hot rolled doesn't leave a mill scale on it. Hot rolled does. That's this dark color on here. It takes quite a bit of grinding to get that mill scale off. And paint and primer and most any other product just does not like to stick to that scale. So anytime you're working with something that's going to need to be painted or chromed or whatever, I recommend cold roll. If you have a hard time finding it, you can use the hot roll. You're going to end up sandblasting or grinding or sanding to get rid of all that mill finish. So what we're working with is a 68 Mustang. I'm going to take you over, show you what the inside of the car is, what the frame rails look like, and why I've chosen to go with custom made ones. And then I'm going to show you what we came up with. Okay, as I think I may have shown you in a couple of previous videos, we have is a 68 Mustang with a full custom frame in it. It goes all the way up through the trunk area. Most of the tail panel's already been taken out. Actually, in all honesty, almost all the sheet metal that's coming out has already been taken out. Started adding some sheet metal back in. That's a footwell transition area from the floor pan to the firewall. Showed you a previous video making one for the passenger side, and we've done the video on the firewall previously, so that panel's still just waiting to ready to go in. So the reason for the custom floor pan is, while this area is almost identical to the factory, each of these arms that go over to the rocker panel are different. The original factory frame rail ended right about in this area. This upright right here for the jig used to come into the factory frame rail, so the factory frame rail ended right in here under the passenger seat and the driver's seat on the other side. So what we've done is we've tied the whole front of the car to the back of the car. We've also, by using our own frame rails, we've narrowed the frame rail distance in the back so that we can get in a wider tire. We'll be mini tub in this one. And we have some custom suspension stuff going in as well. If you notice right over on the far rocker, you can see a black line right along there. And that's about where the factory floor fit. And the factory floor would have come back pretty much level right along here. It fit really well. And right in this area, basically behind the driver's or the passenger seat and then a driver's seat on the other side, the floor drops down. And as it drops down, in this car, it was in the Mustang, it was to provide area for your feet for a rear seat passenger. But in this car, because the floor would be dropping down, it starts exposing our frame rail. And I tried that system originally. I used a factory replacement frame rail, or excuse me, I used a factory replacement floor pan and notched it to fit around the frame rail. When I was all done, it really didn't fit what I was going after, so I've decided I'm going to go ahead and make the floor flat. It's It's going to stretch from one end of this panel. It'll turn up right there, come all the way down the car, and then turn up against the frame rail at the back here, and then into the trunk area. And I'm not sure yet whether we're even going to be running the rear seat, but if we are, the rear seat passengers are going to be a little tight on foot room. And but with the roll cage and everything else that's going in this car, don't know how much room there was going to be for rear seat passengers anyway. I'm going to give you an overview of the car just so you get an idea. So here's looking in from the back. You can see we've got the tail panel cut out of this. It was pretty beat up and rusty. It had somebody had bent it in with hit something. Hadn't done a lot of damage, but enough it was worth just replacing it rather than trying to fix it. With our full-length frame rails here, this is going to allow us to get in custom rear suspension and a much wider tire. We're going to shoot for like a 335, 345 all the way around. And those projects are coming. You'll get to see those as we go along. So like I said, we're going to be using the 16-gauge paint lock sheet metal. And my biggest shear will shear about 42 inches. And my biggest break will do about 40 inches. So, while I have the sheet metal and I have a design, I really didn't have the ability to make the parts here in my own shop. But the guy that I buy my sheet metal from has a really big break and a really big shear. He made me two of these mirrors. I got one left, one right. And so you can see how this is going to fit. This would be the passenger side. So this flange right here goes up against the rocker panel. This flange is where the kick-up is for the rear frame rail, where it's going up to clear the rear suspension. This is the beginnings of a transmission tunnel. I don't know how much of that I'll keep, but I left it long so that I'd be able to either make a roll, add sheet metal, cut it down, whatever I want to do that gives me plenty of room. So then this edge meets up to my transition panel on that side of the car. A little something like this. This area here will be doing a little sheet metal work. We'll do some forming to get everything to match up and look right, fit together real well. Now if you're doing a Mustang, for whatever reason, Ford likes to turn most of the flanges up and inside the car. If you're looking at Chevys, Chevelles, Camaros, most of their flanges turn down and are on the outside of the car. It's not a big deal. You're going to cover it with carpet, but you know, trying to keep in line with what you're doing on another car, it doesn't hurt to follow that manufacturer's process. Just if nothing else, to keep the welds hidden in the same places or access to welds, whatever their thought process was. So what I've got here is a 1/2-inch flange. I'll be punching holes in this all the way down. That'll get me a place to plug weld in. That's a 1/2 inch. This side is approximately 4 inches. What I really have is I had a 24-inch piece of material. That way I could get two out of one 4x10 sheet. And put a 1/2-inch flange, 20 inches, and the leftover. So I guess it's really about 3.5 inches. And then at the very back here, we have a 1-inch flange. This one is kicked out at 70 degrees. This one's 90 degrees. This 1 inch at the back, it's at 130 degrees to match our frame rails. So I'm going to get this set in place, give you a shot of what it's going to look like, put maybe a couple clamps on it so you can get a good idea. And we'll set that transition panel in and get you a few good shots. Unfortunately, I don't have any video of them putting this in the press or the brake, but anybody who's ever done one, you can imagine what it looks like. It's obviously a pretty quick video on this side, but because this is a big flat area, one other thing we're going to want is to roll some beads in here. Don't know really what patterns. Once we get this in the car, get it clamped up, so we know about where it's going to be, I'll mark out my frame rails on the bottom side, and then we'll flip this over and we'll start drawing out a pattern. Try and get you as good a view as I can getting this panel in. With the panel in place, see it fits nice over at the rocker side, and right here we have a cross base, that piece of 1 inch square or 1 1/4 inch square tubing welded in. That's just there as a temporary brace, so it'll come out and that'll let that floor sit down nice and flush all the way along. But it's going to make for a nice floor. It's going to finish out real nice. The flange at the back there, that's just to give us a place to weld up when we are weld onto the piece of sheet metal that'll go up the floor or up the frame rails and around the ends of the wheel wells out there. So while this is laying in here, actually don't even need any clamps. Set this back just a little bit. We're going to need to take a little bit of material off of this. So let me do that real quick and get this panel slid back just. Well, it needs to go back another inch to 1 1/4 inch. I think I'm going to go ahead and get that cross brace cut loose, and we'll weld it to the bottom side just to hold everything back in place. Now using a flap wheel, we'll go ahead and get this smoothed out. I'm not even sure you can see it, but there's a little scar here where I cut just a little bit deep. I have one on the other side here as well. I'm just picky enough that I'll take my welder and actually fill that in and then grind it off smooth again. I don't really think it's too much of an imperfection that it's going to matter. It's going to be under the floor pan, but I just don't like knowing it's there, that there's this scar. So that'll be something else we clean up. Now I'm going to go ahead and weld this piece of square tubing back in on the bottom side here. And that's really just to give myself a little bit of comfort that these frame rails aren't going to move. There's actually a rear frame rail in place. I have a temporary one right here that's a piece of round tube. Chance of this moving, it's already welded to the rocker panels. It's got the upright supports down here. Chance of it moving is pretty slim, but I'm going to go ahead and get this welded in. Probably welded in back up here somewhere, just to make myself happy with it. Better. Now, these frame rails are supposed to be 32 inches outside to outside, and it's exactly 32, so nothing moved, and this is just overkill. But that should do it. So now we'll notch that one corner of the floor pan to go around our wheel tub here, and we'll go ahead and get it set back in place. I've got a rough mark here about what I think needs to come out, and that's about all I'm going to take out. If we end up needing a little more than this, I'm going to take it out of the wheel tub on the next one, on the next pass, and that would be because that's going to get replaced anyway. I don't mind taking a little bit, but I don't want to overdo this corner and then find out I needed some of that back in there. flap wheel real quick. A little bit of cleanup on that, so maybe I get one less scrape and scar. Just as a side note, for those of you who use a Sharpie like I do to mark stuff, Sharpie will show back through your paint and primer on. You'd hate to have that, especially if you were doing a quarter panel or a fender. So you need to clean that off. A wax and grease remover works really well. A really popular method to do it is to use brake cleaner. Problem with brake cleaner is you do need to make sure if you're going to do that, you get a non-chlorinated brake cleaner. I recommend you don't use brake cleaner at all to clean anything you're going to be welding. But if you do, please make sure you get the non-chlorinated version. For those of you with really sharp eyes, you notice that there's an extra cut there. So I did end up laying this panel in, taking it right back out. Instead of hitting the fender well, or the wheel well, I was hitting the edge of my rocker panel. And this rocker panel has already been replaced. It's a good quality piece of sheet metal, probably 11 or 14 gauge. I didn't measure it. And I bought those from the aftermarket. Really good product. That extra notch, it's about a ½ inch there. That allowed me to get this back right on the rear frame rail there. Got it right up here at the front. Okay, so this is the piece of sheet metal. You see back in a previous video we reshaped this quite a bit to make it fit properly, and actually fit flush right up against this other sheet metal. So it's going to fit about like that. Once it gets clamped in, everything gets nice and tight. So the only really fitment issue we have is right here in this corner where we're going from a square brake to this rounded. And our plan is to just make a piece of sheet metal. I'm not sure I'll follow that curve or if I'll just make my own, but I won't have the hard brake there all the way. I'll form something in and then trim this back. Otherwise, that panel fits really well. The other one actually fits just about as well. I haven't trimmed the back corner on it like we have on this one. All this metal here, you can see some of it's had some weld-through primer put on it, but most of it has not, and a lot of it still has the mill scale on it. So all that mill scale needs to be taken off. Put some weld-through primer on it, and then we can have this panel in place and ready to weld. Now, like I said before, I'm going to go underneath, mark out where the frame rails are at, and then that does two things. It'll allow us to know where we need to drill our holes for plug welds, and it tells me where I can come in and do some kind of designs to strengthen the panel with a bead roller. Okay, I think I got everything marked off. Take this back over to the bench. Okay guys, so we're back at the bench. Really didn't finish out this one line here. Around forward, it's just a straight line. Like that. I don't know how well that shows up on the camera, but basically we have the frame rail on one side here, and each of the legs that kick out to the rocker panel. This is the front of the car here, back of the car, and this gap here, probably very little chance that we're going to get a whole lot of the term I use is coffee can. You've got an unformed piece of sheet metal, you can get a lot of wobble in it. If you get enough, you'll actually get it to where it'll pop in and out, and you get a popping sound. It sounds a whole lot like a coffee can or an oil can. For those of you who remember back when oil came in a can, you get that top sound like it was buckling. So this distance here, probably not critical, but just to give it some shape as well, I'll split the difference between here and this rolled edge, and we'll go ahead and put one bead all the way down the thing. And then in the middle here, what I'm thinking is maybe we do like a horseshoe, something like that. And I think both of those would work. We can do that with our roller. We'll go ahead and lay these out, and then we'll decide how we're going to do it. What I've laid out is I've centered between my frame rail and the bend, and then it works out to just a little over 3 inches each direction. So I come about 3 inches in on each inch. I'm also going to go ahead and lay out my horseshoe or whatever I'm going to draw here. If you haven't already bought stock in Sharpie, for watching my videos, you'll know I use enough of them. You should. But also for your own planing, have plenty of them on hand. Just a little bit of oil and grease that's on the sheet metal, if you don't clean it really well, will stop it from riding. Sometimes you can play around with it, write on some paper a few times and get it to working again, but often as not, you just never get it to work again. So what I'm thinking is going up, over, back, down. I started with 3 inch, kind of working off of this pattern. I'm thinking now I might want to come in about 5 inches so I get a little closer to the center. See, this panel is 11, so let's do that. Let's come in 5.5, 5.5. This way. 5.5. Maybe the same thing. We're coming 5.5 inches. Keep it lined up nice. Lay off that one side. Like that. Roll the arch. Okay, so we've got the bead roller set up, and actually have one floor pan rolled out. We're going to go ahead and roll out the second one.
There's one of the horseshoes, or what I'm calling a horseshoe. There's another one. And then you can see the long line, full length down the thing. Let's see if I can get it from another angle here. You see, this is kind of the goal. There's one, barely can see one long line there.
Material up in here. Swivel chair makes a nice tool rest. Nice piece of rest for the swivel chair there makes a nice rest for my material. 9 revolutions. Don't want to try and go. This is 16 gauge, so we don't want to try and go full depth of our groove right off. We're going to work it back and forth a few times, and right now we're just going to get this right up against that, the die right up against that back lip, and then we'll roll it forward, follow our line as far as we can until this edge hits the tool, and we'll do that for this one and this one. When we roll this one and the far one, we'll be able to roll it in and then turn it and just about catch the same spot. So between the two, we can get it all worked in. If we have any problems, we can always flip the dies and then just finish it out. But I think we're going to get real close here. far as that won't go. Another half turn and go backwards over the same groove. On the 16 gauge, running about to a depth of about 11 turns on this particular crank on this machine. It's about what is a nice shape, at least that's where I like it. Right there we have a nice little groove. I just like it just a little bit deeper, or floor pans has a nice rigidity to it. There's our 11. Hold this one more time. Again, just rolling the bead. Just going real slow, trying to keep our marker line right on the center of the bead. I find it easier to roll these. Roll the direction that I see the line, so I can feed it with the line. I'm sure some people are pretty good at rolling in either direction. It's just not me. Okay. Be the final roll on this one. We'll do the next one. That's it. So just roll around the last corner to tie in what we started, what we started with, and what we've been doing. Take that one out. Move everything down and roll out. So I had the work area. One of the things I'd love to have would be just a big flat table. Would make it a little harder to make it nice and easy to move your material. Just be harder to swing your material around and see what you were doing. So you have to find some, I don't know, some compromise in how you went about it, but should be doable. Let's start this one. Okay, so that's it for the two little horseshoes. All I got left is roll that one long bead. So I'm going to set my material catcher over here and rest, and reset the roller one more time and roll that back and forth probably 2 or 3 times to get the depth right. Roll back. That should be it. Everything rolled in here. Back off a little bit, get that. See how the roller fits in there. And, see here where it doesn't start right at the edge of the metal, it starts back, oh, it's about an inch. When you're on the back side of this die, the curvature of the die was hitting the lip on that end, so that's just as far back as I could get it. I think it looks really nice this way, then rather than if it had run all the way to the end. There'd be a dimple there and right on the edge of the sheet metal. So all the grooves we just rolled, one of them fits over in this area, one of the horseshoes. The other one fits in this area, one of the horseshoes, and then the long line starts way up here and works its way all the way to the back. It stays just outside that frame rail, and you can see right over here there's a pretty good demonstration where the frame rail is at versus where the groove is at, just splitting that difference. You can see back here where we've got the IRS in. One of our next projects is to build our own front suspension. So I'm modeling the suspension off of like a C5 Corvette as far as most of the geometry. I've improved or changed some of the geometry. I'm hoping it's an improvement in a couple places. And these are just my mock-ups. Upper control arms are going to mount here and here. Lower control arms from the other side of the boxes I showed you there a minute ago. And then the spindle, which is a C5 spindle, And that's really the only part that I'm using that's actually C5. Everything else is just, I'm going to fabricate. But it's going to sit right in this area here.
So building the front suspension's the next project on the board. You can see where everything's been drawn out. Come up with a couple different ideas for bushing measurements. Thanks for watching Allison Customs Project Car TV. Like us on Facebook and check us out at AllisonCustomsOnline.com.